One. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another exciting episode of Delusions of Grandeur. Here we are continuing our themed month of local horror films. So we have a couple of cool hosts hosting this particular film. Why don't we go out into the backwoods and see who's hiding behind what rock? So, Dustin, why don't you
hiding behind a rock, eh?
Why not?
Oh, we'll get
No,
to
this
that.
is
this
movie
movie
takes place in the
mask.
Or
This
rented footstall.
I was gonna say
Well-
you could be behind a dumpster because it's in the city.
Yeah, you didn't
like I
find
was-
any woods in
In a
this one.
rancid toilet stall.
Ugh.
Mhm.
Well, so I've lost my place already.
Candyman.
Well, the Candyman.
Well, yeah, we're covering Candyman. So I think the urban setting is appropriate. I had a joke, but Dane kind of crashed it. So,
Huh.
so yeah. Well, I'm from Illinois, and Candyman takes place in Chicago. So this was my pick for local horror.
Mhm.
I grew up about an hour away from Chicago, so I didn't go there very often, but it was a thing. And according to the back of the Shut Factory Blu-ray, Candyman is about a graduate student who hears about Candyman, a slave spirit with a hook hand who is said to haunt a notorious housing project, and she thinks she has a new twist for her thesis. Braving the gang-ridden territory to visit the site, Helen assumes Candyman doesn't exist until he appears, igniting a string of grisly slayings. But the police don't believe in monsters and charge Helen with the crimes, and the only one who can set her free is Candyman.
I mean, there's some inaccuracies in there because there was 25 murders going on before we start the bitch.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
on Shot Factory, you know. It's good
I
enough.
paraphrased it a little bit because it was kind of long.
Right.
But yeah, so this is a pretty great movie, starring Tony Todd, who follows me on Twitter. Hello, if you're listening.
Oh, no.
Mhm.
So he's pretty cool. I got to meet him at Flashback Weekend in Chicago, and he could not have been like a nicer guy. Like he was great. And this is his most iconic role. It's what he's known for, and he really knocks it out of the park in this movie.
For sure.
So the first time I saw this movie was a couple of years ago when I was first starting to get into horror, and I remember being a little confused as to what was going on because it's got a lot of how do I put this? It's got a lot of intellectual moments in it. Like it's meant to get you thinking about, the meanings of myths and all kinds of Clive Barker goodness.
Well, it's
Yeah.
specifically urban legends, urban fantasy, and
Precisely.
yeah. Well, it's the myths of what would have been maybe roughly 100 years prior, maybe a little bit more. Those carrying over into a heavily urbanized area, despite the changes in buildings and technology and all that. It's these tales that endure. And it's not like America has that extensive of a history in comparison to, say, England or any of the old European countries, but nonetheless, it's these things that reverberate throughout the centuries.
That's
Well,
exactly what I was
folklore,
trying to
baby.
say.
I
Good catch
I
there.
believe that Candyman is like the urban fairy tale version of Bloody Mary.
Yeah.
That's how I could. That's how I could put it.
That's
Pretty
part
much,
of it.
yeah. You were saying something, Will?
Oh no, I was just saying, modern folklore, man. It's good fun. And it is, yeah, it's definitely like urban Bloody Mary,
Yep.
she got signed to Jive Records, Def Jam. That's what I'm saying. Okay. Rick Rubin producing that shit.
How about we go with your first impressions, Mel?
Oh, I love Candyman. I mean, I don't know if I love it in the same way some people do, but it's one that I have a fondness for because I rented it several times as a kid, and I feel like it would be on TV fairly often. I have a lot of memories of seeing it on TV on school nights, which was weird too. But it's just kind of one that you'd always sit through, you know? Urban legend stuff is always fun. Tony Todd's scary as fuck. I mean, this pretty much, like you said, is his legacy right here. You know, this is how they can insert him into just any movie as like a creepy Undertaker, and you're like, yes, Candyman. So it's always a good time seeing him on screen, especially when he's puking up bees on chicks. And I mean, you can't really go wrong with Candyman. I will say from this time, my first impression of it was, damn, this movie like looks really good. I don't think I ever appreciated that enough in previous watches of it because it was on like VHS or on TV back in the day. So yeah, watching it on that special edition that I got off of Dustin, like on a proper screen, was a nice treat. It's a well shot movie, you know. Some cool stuff in there. Some really cool urban decay going on too, and some fairly disgusting moments. So it's just a good, well-rounded horror flick, you know. What about you, Dustin? Or whoever else is next?
Well, a lot of that stuff, I already gave my first impressions, but like I was kind of saying before, a lot of that stuff kind of went over my head the first time I saw it. So I built an appreciation for this movie over a couple of watches. Just because I didn't fully understand, you know, the significance of the urban legend to the plot the first time I saw it.
I mean, as a kid, it was just like, when's he going to puke those bees? You know, like that's what you're going for, and that hook action, right? But as I've gotten older, definitely I've appreciated it more as well. So there's that.
Yeah, there was I was telling one of my neighbors that, you know, Tony Todd follows me on Twitter, and she was like, "Don't stuff me with bees, my guy."
That's pretty rad. If you are watching, Tony, let us know how those bees taste, because it looked like you had a lot of real bees in your mouth.
Apparently,
That's pretty insane.
Every time he got stung, ended up making $23,000.
Yeah,
An extra $3,000.
Oh shit! I'd have just had
That's
someone there
nice.
with an EpiPen and agitated the shit out of him. You know?
Yeah, I didn't know that he made that much.
Well,
I knew he got
had a
I knew he got
clause.
paid.
What was it, 1,000 per sting? Something.
I think it was 100 per
He
sting.
got stung
Oh,
23
100.
times.
Sorry,
Yeah.
100%. Yeah,
Nice little payday for being stung.
Yeah.
Especially when you're
Paid by the
allergic to
sting.
bees.
Well, I mean, you could get pretty badly hurt if you get enough
Yeah.
bee
Yeah.
stings.
Yeah.
So
Well, I mean, the honeybee is actually considered the most deadly organism in Australia. It's killed more people than any of the other things there.
I find that hard to believe.
No.
But it is true.
How
I
about we
think
get
they always
your
just be like stepping in underground beehives down there and shit. That's
Bee allergies, I'm telling you. That's right there. You get an allergic reaction to bees, it'll kill you just as quickly as something like a funnel web or anything else down there. Especially if you can't get to an EpiPen in time.
I once knew a collie that got stung like 48 times and still survived.
Jeez.
Oh wow. Which,
how-
hey, you don't want to. Let's just say this: you do not want to mix Candyman with Nicolas Cage, because then he'd be like, "No, not the bees, not the
or that kid
bees."
from My Girl, Macaulay.
That's
Well,
Yeah.
actually,
Oh,
a little bit of trivia for you, Mo. Apparently, the bee wrangler in this one is the one who worked on My Girl.
Yes, see, I'm
Yeah,
never not going to
Macaulay-
bring that up when I have the opportunity, because it's
Macaulay
fucking
Culkin gets
hilarious.
owned pretty hard in that movie by the bees.
Yeah.
So,
Anyway, how about we do your first impressions, Brandon?
all right. Well, as you can see from my background, I've got the Candyman right there. And you know, as they say, you know, the Candyman can, because he mixes it with love and makes the world taste good.
Indeed, he does.
Like bees.
He mixes something with love.
Any case, I had an odd story about my first impression of Candyman. In 1994, I was in high school geography, And in the midst of our class, because for geography class, we were required to start out with all the states and their capitals, then all of the world's countries and all of their capitals. And we had to know them all, memorize them all, and spell them all out. That was the biggest part about that. But he would do highlights from each one, and one of them was showing Candyman for Illinois. So it was kind of funny that I saw this at the time.
He showed it to you in school?
Yes.
That's
Nice.
awesome.
Yeah, like
I was not a fan of horror movies at the time. So it was not so awesome for me. I mean, seeing Monty Python and the Holy Grail and European history, that was like the highlight. But this
Oh, if
one,
you're not ready for horror movies, this one must have been pretty terrifying.
Yeah, I was not very happy with it at the time because I already had a fear of bees because I've been stung lots and lots and lots of times. Hornets, yellow jackets, never honeybees, oddly enough. But I've been stung by a lot of other things. And I will say that movie did freak me out. The bee thing freaked me out more than anything else. I found the story the first time kind of boring when I first watched it, though the presentation Tony Todd did was an amazing one. It stuck with me even later as an adult. I watched, I think, one more time in between. I don't remember how because I didn't start owning it until I finally this year got the actually it was during the holiday because they put the Shop Factory edition really nicely on sale. So I think it was under $10 I got it for. So I was perfectly happy buying that for
It's
that.
on sale right now for that.
So yeah, so that was good. Good pricing for a film that I needed to have in my collection. So I finally got to rewatch it again with my wife on the nice big 50-inch upstairs, and it was a nice experience. I really enjoyed it that time around. Again, he does a great job there. I think it was. I think I absorbed a lot more this time than I did when I was kind of like, the bees, get away.
All right, who wants to go next? How about you, Forrest?
all right, definitely. Okay, so for me, this is definitely not a first-time watch. Actually, my earliest memory of Candyman was not from watching the movie itself. It was actually I remember seeing an ad for it on the back of a Batman comic when I was a kid, and that image of Tony Todd with a bloody stump with a hook. With a bloody, he's got like a bloody stump with a hook in place, with all the bees. That just stuck with that image was just etched immediately into my 7-year-old mind. But eventually I did catch it on. But eventually, I did catch it on I did catch it on television when I was a teenager, and it just became one of those movies that I would just stop and watch every time it was on television. I ended up it became like a frequent rental, and then a couple years ago I actually saw it. I actually did get a chance to see it in theaters in 35 millimeter.
Are we looking for a picture of Tony Todd in costume, or what are we doing, Dave?
Yeah,
He's looking at Virginia Madsen at this point.
Yeah, she was great in Sideways.
Yes, she was.
I didn't know that was doing that.
Well, if you're doing it with OBS, everybody can see what's going on.
Anyway,
Just
but
be-
yeah, it
Be
was
glad you didn't visit that other website you were on.
Anyway,
Continue, Forrest.
But anyway, yeah, it was a movie that I just frequently, that I frequently let it, I would, stop and watch whenever it was on, or I'd rent it, or borrow it from the library. It's always just been I feel like 90s horror, especially like early 90s horror, gets a bad rap. Like how it was considered like it was considered like a downtime for the genre after the 80s, but I disagree. I feel like Candyman is definitely one of the best. It's like one of the best horror movies of all time, and definitely one of the best in the 90s. Like the production, it's a really good looking movie. Fantastic. Tony Todd, he has such a presence over the over the whole movie. like even before he shows up, there's just that he's just it's just I'm trying to think how to explain it. He's so
Larger than life.
You feel the specter of the Candyman looming
Yes.
over the film even before he appears.
Exactly. He's just such a presence over like that. That's just ingrained throughout the whole movie, and it works really well.
Part of that, I think, is also the writing. You know, that they really do a good job of making you feel like he's there, even though he doesn't appear for a good while.
Yeah, and actually, after I decided, and actually, I decided, like, I just actually just got this in the mail. Got this in the mail yesterday. Was Scream Factory's Blu-ray release. I was like, I figured, I've seen this movie so many times, might as well just own it. And also like
Factory release is really good.
Yes, and also like the urban decay. There's that urban decay, all the racial tensions. That I feel like I feel like it was definitely a horror movie ahead of its time. I mean, at the time it was being made, I think Hollywood was looking for a new Freddy or Jason, and they were hoping that Candyman would be that answer. But which kind of he ended up not being. But I think I think in many ways the film is definitely a trailblazer for the genre, for horror, for slashers, for like race and class in cinema.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, if it wasn't for stuff like this, we very likely wouldn't have stuff like possibly Get Out,
For us,
Tales from the Hope. That's why that new one, that sequel, is being made by Jordan Peele. I mean, that has that level.
Well, he has.
It's by Nia DaCosta, and Jordan Peele's producing.
Yeah. I think he co-wrote the script too.
He's becoming quite the producer these days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which I don't know. Did you have anything more for us?
I'm not. If there's anything else, I'll probably bring it up in the episode.
Because
how about you, Dave?
I specifically because I watched this film just so I'm different from everybody, because we got to be different. I have the Arrow Steelbook, which I got during the big Arrow sale last summer. I saw the movie streaming on Netflix. I saw it a little bit earlier, maybe a month or two before, and I dug it. And I thought, as I was trying so hard to rebuild my collection, that I'll get it back, but I'll get a version of it that most people won't have. And because I thought this cover was really badass, and it's a steelbook, so I don't have to worry about does it have the slipcover or doesn't it? All that nonsense. But yeah, it's pretty sweet. I like the creepiness of it, and it conveys the mood of the movie really nicely. But yeah,
is that art based off the mural?
Yes, the mural. And it's got the mouth and the font and all that good stuff. But I saw it over the summer, and I really enjoyed it. I thought Tony Todd really is kind of an unsung horror hero. Or rather, unsung horror villain. He does have a presence. He's got a really creepy voice. And from everything I've discerned, much like the great horror legends, that in real life he's just the nicest person. Those are the kind of people you want to meet. The people that they get it all out there on the screen, so that way when you meet them, they have no other badness to show you, because they put it all out there on the screen. But I really dug it. I particularly liked how it was kind of a forerunner to what we're seeing now, with like the African American experience being talked about through the horror genre, which we'd seen some of before, or some heavy elements of it, like with Night of the Living Dead, and with The People Under the Stairs is a good one on that front. And then this came along, and I specifically watched Get Out finally. It had been years since it came out, but I finally watched it over the weekend, specifically because that is considered to be kind of the one that helped to propel the African American experience through the horror genre thing to the mainstream. And that is true, certainly for this period of history, but you have to give it up for films like Candyman and like The People Under the Stairs and that kind of stuff for helping to lay the groundwork. And if anything,
Don't
what's
forget Tales from
interesting,
the Hood.
yeah, that too.
Night.
But what's so important, I think, about, like, let's say Get Out touches on a lot of like it touches on some historical things on a metaphorical level, but it's more concerned with the contemporary African American experience, which is not to say that Candyman isn't, but it's specifically rooted in
its time.
well, that and in a historical character. This is someone who is the son of a slave, but he is a free man was he a free man in Chicago, in that area, educated and trying to be an artist, so he's trying to like better himself in this society where his opportunities to do so are significantly limited compared to a white man, even though he's still in a free state and all that stuff. But he's trying to better himself, and the prejudices of his contemporaries still get, they still make their way to him, and he meets a grisly fate as a result. And the fact that his suffering was indicative of many people in the North and South. And it's also just the fact that he took on a larger than life presence that stuck around hundreds of like over 100 years later, and up to and including becoming a figure of urban legend that still has a historical basis. So his presence, his tale of woe, endures despite urbanization, despite the fact that Chicago, I think the crime problem's even worse now than it was then, and like the surrounding ghettos and that kind of stuff. It's like it's gotten even worse than it was then, but it's such that those legends and those tales of suffering they endure. And this is a good representation of how those kind of historical iniquities they keep reverberating throughout the generations.
Now, I wanted to say for Get Out, as that Get Out itself was far different than a lot of these because of a couple of basic things, and then I think Jake should definitely do his. But Get Out, basically, Get Out did not require any white protagonist as Candyman did, but also it depicted people not saying, okay, well, because usually if it was in a horror movie, if it was an African American group, it was they were depicted as poor or urban poor, and this one didn't do either of those tropes. So that's why I think really Get Out broke away from any of these. I'm not saying anything bad about this in a way, because this also was a really good film, but I wanted to just say Get Out really broke the mold to move on to be something completely different.
Oh, certainly.
And now for something completely different. Yes.
I guess, Jake.
Actually, since you mentioned Tony Todd's voice, I should mention, like, I've often found myself doing an impression of Tony Todd as Candyman. It's something when it's like, it's.
Well, I hadn't realized some of his vocal credits, but I just finished watching the season. Well, 2 seasons ago. I can't remember. I'm losing track.
He does a lot of voice acting now.
He did. He was Zoom on Flash, which is a pretty notable credit. And I see he played. I was going to say, I see he plays Darkseid, and that seems like a character that would benefit from a voice like this. And Brandon, this is yet another reason to look at Sky Sharks, apparently.
It's sort of funny. I was first introduced to Tony Todd through Adam Green's TV series Holliston, where he Holliston is like a sitcom where they do like TV tropes for their episodes. And they do, the episode Tony Todd is in is the episode where you have the house guest who won't leave. Like they hire him to be in their movie and he just decides to stay in their apartment. And there's a scene where it's like, just tell him he has to leave. And Tony Todd's watching a football game and his team loses and he stands up and he's like, "No, how can this be? I could kill someone." In his voice. He's like, "Did you want something?" "No."
Hard to believe they were going to try and get Eddie Murphy for that role.
Yeah, that would have been a different movie.
For Candyman?
Yeah.
Yeah, they wanted to use a comedian for the role.
He was too short, apparently.
Tony Todd is a giant man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Eddie Murphy later went on to do Vampire in Brooklyn with Wes Craven, so
Yeah.
kind of got it.
It would have been a different movie, though.
It would have been a very different feel, for sure.
Yeah, but anyway, your first impression, Jake?
Yes, well, I'm coming to this new. Obviously, I'm the newbie of the bunch with this one. And again, I not knowing who Tony Todd was, I didn't recognize him in Flash. This may be the first starring role. Probably the first starring role I've seen him in. Overall, I've known about this film for many years. I mean, it's a very well-known film, and it's one that I remember seeing advertised. I remember that it's creative and it's effective, but that disturbing poster that Dave has up behind him, I remember that very distinctly. The idea of a bee being that close to the eye just does not do it for me. This was one that I always knew about. I think, honestly, in high school, maybe middle school, because this came out early enough that might have been a thing. My friends might have actually talked about this one as an actual urban legend. I can't remember for sure. I know the Bloody Mary legend, definitely, but I feel like some of them did do Candyman as the alternate. So I've known about it for many years, and it was always kind of there. Kind of like that other Clive Barker one that we did, the Hellraiser. It was always kind of there. It was like, I need to see that. I don't want to see it. I need to see it. But ever since, the conversation came back to this one with Jordan Peele talking about it the way he has been, I've been like a little more curious. And I was like, I ought to give it a go. I will say that from my, those of you who are our faithful viewers, or listeners, whatever, will know that I do not have quite the same threshold for blood and guts and gore and craziness that these other crazy people do. I actually found Candyman mostly very tolerable. There were only a few scenes that were bad from my perspective, so that's a good thing. Some of the B scenes were some of the more disturbing ones, I will admit. But and poor Cassie Lemons, that was one shot that I did see full on. But I will say, first of all, Philip Glass's score is phenomenal. But 2 minutes into the movie, I was like, this music kicks ass. So that always is a good thing for me. I did like Tony Todd, and I've long been a fan of Virginia Madsen, mostly from Sideways, but I've seen her in a lot of stuff over the years. This is easily the earliest movie I've seen her in by about 4 or 5 years, and she was pretty darn cute when she was younger. I mean, not that she wasn't later on, but and she's a very gifted actress, so having her as the protagonist helped a lot. Overall, it was a good movie. I'm glad I saw it.
Oh, good.
I liked it a lot better than Hellraiser. I'll say that.
Well, your thing is you have trouble with the blood and guts, and Hellraiser was all blood and guts.
Well, I also have
yeah.
trouble with weird, messed up crap, and Hellraiser was all about that.
Yeah, that whole torture thing is a difficult thing. I know. That's why I think that Hostel will be Jake's favorite film.
For sure.
I will
I mean-
sit that week out.
Hellraiser was a different kind of animal, though, because I mean that was physical torture, but even more than that, it was like existential torture because it's all about tearing one's soul apart. So it's even more gruesome.
Mhm.
Yeah. Your turn, Dave.
Alrighty. Well, I grew up a little differently. My mom, while I was growing up, was very, very Christian. So a lot of African American films were taboo. So
I don't know if Christian's the word for that, Dave.
Well, unfortunately, there were echoes of it with us too. I hate to say. Ugh.
But this was a film that I had to see because my people that I knew had told me about it, and finally I got to see it on my own. And to me, this is like the film that puts people of color on the board, because this is the first serious horror film for
Yeah, it's not an exploitation movie.
No, definitely not that.
I mean, Tales from the Hood and Leprechaun Back to the Hood and you know, films of that
wondering how long
nature
we
were
could go
done
before that
in
coming up,
comical
you know?
in comical substance, not serious. They were comical, and they were
Well,
laughing.
Tales from the Hood. Tales from the
Black-
Hood was pretty serious.
Blackula,
It was, but it was
Blackenstein.
blaxploitation
but they are
almost.
considered comedy horrors. This one is like the Silence of the Lambs of urban films to me.
Another one, another horror film that featured Kazi Lemons as the best friend to the female lead. Interestingly enough,
But you also have a very young Tony Todd. He's very young in here. I mean, he's a very tall man, and he cuts a figure. I think in the film, and to me, he's kind of like his own kind of entity and animal. I mean, it's a psychological love story that we see here, because Helen is the one that goes looking for him, and because a lot of people have forgotten him and who he was, and she was the journalist that ended up going and seeking him out, the one that was trying to cover the entire story, and he saw her from the other side, you know. So so it's kind of like it was a very sexual movie. At least as far as him and her are concerned, because in a sense, he uses her for his message, you know, that he, you know, and it's
Be my victim.
exactly.
Be.
What's interesting about all of that is that his story takes place in this part of town that is, you know, a ghetto and is kind of forgotten by, you know, conventional / predominantly white society. And yet what you find with places that are kind of historically turbulent or not with a lot of money or some combination thereof, what you find is that a lot of old pain tends to stick around for a while. You know, it can endure for generations, and it's one of those things where, especially like when, like I live in the Charlotte metro area of Charlotte, North Carolina, and we tend not to do a very good job of preserving our history. You know, Charlotte has had a lot of different industries that have taken root over the years, and we have a tendency when there's a lot of growth and everything, so we have a tendency to bulldoze a lot of buildings and that kind of stuff. But it's more so like I think the lesson you'll find with this film is that no matter how much you want to bulldoze over pain or forget about people or about their stories or whatever, that they will come back. They will get revealed, even if it's through the lens of urban mythology, which, I mean, that's really kind of the crux of Our Leading Lady. That's the crux of what gets her started in this whole thing, is just the idea of contemporary urban myths. And it's like, well, that's true, but then there's also the history that's behind the myth, and that's so tempting for us to kind of magically forget about it. And this movie's all about why we should never forget about it.
And actually, you're talking about haven't they since cleared out Cabiria Green and
down and
yeah.
No,
But
there were real gang members in the actual film. They actually had
that was
said
the only
that
way they could film there. Yeah,
they actually had police snipers sitting there in some of the scenes, just ready in case something went down. That's kind of dang.
Yeah, apparently they only spent like 3 days actually filming in Cabrini Green. The rest of those scenes were done in studio in L.A.
Yeah.
Well, and there's probably still people living in there too. That happens a lot with when they clear them out. They don't necessarily make a place for the other people to go, So it's not uncommon to find those abandoned apartment complexes like in Detroit where there's gangbangers slanging crack and there's people like still living there because they had nowhere else to go.
Well, you could do that in most cities. I mean, shoot, Richmond. Actually, Richmond, could easily do that. There's a huge slave history in Richmond. We have a trail.
Richmond has areas you ain't supposed to go to if you don't know what you're doing. I've had a personal upfront experience with this in Richmond, and it shook me for some time thereafter, which was, according to what I read, the director was actually trying to play off of that with this movie, which was really cool.
There are areas of Milwaukee that you don't want to get caught after dark in certain places.
Yeah,
so.
that's any area, really, if you think about it. There were areas where I grew up in Covington, which was like a little town that you still wouldn't want to be in after dark.
That's a different crowd.
I'm in New York, and there's once you go outside of Manhattan, there's plenty of neighborhoods in the Bronx and Brooklyn.
I think Forrest's got to speed,
Probably, yeah.
Especially in the 80s. The Richmond did have the highest murder rate for a while.
Let me just throw one real quick thing out, and then I guess we led back. Dave, I don't know if you've finished your thought or whatever, but you put a thought in my head when you said on the other side or whatever. Did anyone else suddenly, so we keep talking about Tony Todd and his like deep voice and his great voice. Did anyone else suddenly hear Keith David singing Friends on the Other Side after that?
Oh, that'd be cool. Now, oh man, hey, how about this? Put Keith David and Tony Todd together on screen. How about that?
Cool.
Oh my God.
Well, this was definitely a different take on the supernatural element, so to speak, because, Virginia Madsen's character, she definitely cut a jibe as the newspaper reporter that was obsessed with finding.
Grad student. She's a grad student, Dave.
Yeah. Well, she was doing some investigative work as a grad student. Okay. It doesn't matter. She was doing a report.
Yeah.
But it was said on the back of your Shelf Factory that a newspaper reporter or something like that. So
it did not.
I thought she had a friend that was a reporter.
I think she had a friend. I think that one friend that she had. I mean, I think she must have been majoring in what, like, get all your friends killed, 101.
Get your only friend killed.
Friends, family, everybody around you.
Pretty sure he did that shit.
Well, regardless, it's kind of like a be careful what you wish for kind of a story too.
Yeah.
I mean, you want to uncover the true story behind it, but there was an obsession that Virginia Madsen had to the character that I'm sitting here watching it, and I'm looking at her character, and I'm getting pissed off at her because it's like, you don't go do that shit. Not to go there, and you went there.
Curiosity killed the cat, bro. I guess
I was
that's
frustrated with her a few times.
Say his name in the mirror
definitely.
5 times. It's like, why would you? Yeah, don't do that.
We get
Why is
the
she
very
grabbing that
beginning.
cleaver? Or
Isn't it in the beginning of the film we have a slumber party going on to start the film off?
they were just right. They were saying, I think they were. It was a late night writing. It was a late night research and writing session.
Yeah.
They were telling the story.
And I believe that was the whole thing that kicked off her investigation, if I remember correctly, was hearing the murders there.
Yeah, from a classmate.
Incidentally, random fun bit of trivia. Madsen apparently is a Chicago native, so that's appropriate. Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Well, sometimes you just got to have the people hide behind the wall of chainsaws.
I have a feeling that the wall of chainsaws would have fit right in with this.
Well, I think, honestly, besides not forgetting our history, as unpleasant as it often is, the other moral of the story, I think, is that sometimes in academia, but in just other fields of even fiction or in journalism or any number of things, where we're always looking for that kind of hot angle or that scoop or that thing that is unknown that we could uncover to make our story or our telling of it more exciting. One thing that we forget about is the fact that, real people, like in this case, a real person in the story died, and, that created that basis for the Candyman legend. But it's like, it's not just like not just a story, it's not just a frivolous thing, and we often kind of treat these sorts of things as if they are frivolous, but it's like, no, these real people in history and in our own contemporary times, they felt these things, and it just kind of gives us a greater respect for what people go through and how it does impact them throughout the centuries.
Dustin or Mo, did you either one of you want to give us a little rundown of the plot?
Go ahead, Mo.
There? Well, basically, we got the college lady, and her friend. They're doing their research on the Candyman legend and just local folklore and stuff. They're trying to do a thesis on that. And, they kind of learn the basics of the story. They end up interviewing 2 cleaning ladies, and they find out that there's, a recent string of 25 murders that people are attributing to the Candyman. So they decide to go down to Cabrini Green and check the shit out. After they've attempted to summon the Candyman in the mirror, nothing happens, because they haven't, I guess, dipped the toe in far enough yet. So they head on down there to Cabrini Green to kind of investigate the place, the scene of the crimes. They end up running into this girl and her son. They see some really cool urban artwork, some murals and whatnot. That Candyman one is fucking terrifying. And, they kind of just get it even more cemented in their head that these people at least believe that this legend is true. They're either telling the truth or they're using it as a way to cope with the hardship of living in the conditions that they're living in. And so she pretty much becomes enthralled with the idea of that. Her thesis kind of starts to become more about the people of this area specifically and this Candyman legend instead of just a general local folklore thing, which it very well might have started out as. They end up having a dinner with a really sleazy, probably American dude who's trying to sound British. And he tells them the backstory of Candyman, which we've kind of covered. He was, a well-to-do freed slave, I think it was, or at least the son of a slave or something like that.
Slave, I think.
Yeah, and he got to go, through various opportunities to all these good schools. He became a celebrated artist. He ended up falling for one of these ladies that he was commissioned to paint, fathering a child with her. And the local people, the local white folk, got mighty pissed off about this. And so they took him out, they chopped off his hand with a rusty saw, and they covered him in a bunch of, like, you know, honey. And I'm sure you can imagine what happened from there. You know, a lot of bee talk leading into this, so just, you know, put two and two together. So they basically got the backstory on the whole thing, and she decides to go back to Cabrini Green. I don't know why that's hard for me to say right now. And, you know, kind of look into it further. It's sort of at this point that she gets attacked by some local toughs that are clearly, you know, using the imagery of this Candyman legend to intimidate people. And they start to kind of, you know, after she goes through all this, they give her a real nice knocker on her face. And she has to identify the guy in a lineup. The cops are immediately, like, starting to just attribute these murders to this guy, which we will learn eventually is probably not entirely the case. But, you know, it's basically after this where the movie really gets underway. We're through our introduction to the area and to, you know, our principal character and her friend, where she encounters the Candyman for real in the parking garage. And I guess I'll let Dustin pick it up from here. But shouts out to that poo writing on the wall in that bathroom when she went back.
Oh, God.
Yeah, that's pretty gross.
Every time I watch
that bathroom scene will always stick with me for this.
I think it's stuck with a few of the people on the set, if you know.
I would have thought,
like probably to them
the
rather.
bathroom
You know?
scene in Daddy Daycare with Eddie Murphy would have been a little bit more gross.
Just anything involving poop, like, just gets me. Just no
anything involving Eddie Murphy after a certain year. Just
well, I was going to say, I heard that movie was induced illness for different reasons. But anyway, from what I hear. And Mo, in your summary, I must have missed it, but did you also mention what a cheating douche her husband was?
No, yeah, the dude gets stabbed drinking the juice, and Terminator 2 is a right prick in this movie too.
Nice.
So we have that going.
Trevor, what a douche.
It's always fun to have this, but you know, it's interesting, the apartment that they live in, this nice condo that has a beautiful view, but it also shows a lot of the almost elitist character of really the husband more than anything else. I mean, I think they were they in kind of reclaimed or kind of what they call gentrified apartments?
Yeah.
They
that was a
basically
fun
paved
little
over part of the area and made it their houses, you know, like there's the concrete right under the spackle and that type of stuff. And the back of their mirrors are missing because somebody was like murdering people through mirrors or something. So yeah, we got a bit of that, and who knows, maybe that was, you know, someone doing a copycat Candyman thing, much like our tough guy in the bathroom in this movie, you know, using the legend to scare people. Go ahead,
I thought
Jake.
that was a fun little bit of commentary that they had there, where she was talking about the apartments and how she came to realize it was almost the same floor plan as in this, you know, very downtrodden urban, and she'd found out the history, and it basically, it was like the city built this poor people housing and decided, wait a minute, they've got a view. They're in a good part of town. We can't do that. So they redid it and sold it as condos for well-to-do people. And I was like, Chicago, you fail.
She's good at digging up the dirt, so while she might not be a reporter at all,
right,
she would make a good one day.
And ultimately, she goes back to the what is it? The Cabrini Green area, where the mother and her child are, and she wakes up as if from like a dream.
Well, first she meets the real Candyman, who kind of explains that she discredited his legend, so he must shed blood to perpetuate it.
Yeah.
So Candyman is like
to be shed, you know.
So by kind of
she woke it
Jedi
up.
mind tricks her ass. He's just like, and then she wakes up. You know, he like supernaturally roofies her and controls her like a puppet for a little while.
Yeah.
And you know, she ends up waking up in this apartment where there's this Rottweiler with a severed head. Lady is screaming super disturbingly. I don't know why watching it this time that part of the movie really bothered me. Like
well,
just
she
the way
wakes
that
up
lady
in a
was.
pool of blood, and
Yeah.
at first you think she's stabbed. You can't really tell. It's like,
Well, yeah.
yeah.
And of course, her baby is missing, so that becomes kind of a thing. So the police pick her up. She's she's
Yeah, we're
being
glossing
held.
over how she picks up a meat cleaver.
Yeah.
Oh, that was a great.
Yeah.
When the police actually get there, just her on top of the other woman with the meat cleaver, like.
Yeah.
I'm innocent, I swear.
Though these
Sounds
days
like
I
you
could
were
see it
gonna-
to where they'd be like, they arrest the woman that's underneath her, and there's like, I'm really sorry that woman frightened you in her own apartment.
Helen will be a total Karen nowadays.
Yeah, it's a good blood splatter effect too when she chops her in the arm with that cleaver, and legitimate self-defense. But that lady had all rights to be freaking out, you know.
Yeah.
So basically the cops pick her up, and we get a really kind of uncomfortable scene with her acting like a bit of a Karen at the police station, and she's like sobbing and trying to just not go through the regular procedure and talk to her husband or the detective or whatever. She thinks she's going to get some special treatment, but that lady guard isn't having it, you know.
Well, in fairness, the last time she saw that same detective, she was the victim, and she was treated like, very well and everything, and she doesn't know what's going on, so she thinks he's going to help her again, and he's looking at her like,
there's a dead dog.
If it was Samuel Jackson, he would have been looking at her like, bitch, please.
Dude, the tone changes when you're caught with a meat cleaver, in like combat with a woman whose baby is now missing.
Yeah.
And not only that, but you killed the dog. Now, do you want to talk to a lawyer? So yeah, that's pretty much where we're at with that. You got anything you want to add in there, Dustin, about these sequences?
No, I think you covered it pretty completely.
It's good stuff.
Like,
it shows,
it's kind of ambiguous whether or not Helen actually did decapitate the Rottweiler. Like,
right.
I always thought Candyman did it and just covered her in the blood.
Well, and I think the cops do say that the lady said that she just came in and found the dog decapitated and then went to the baby's crib and was screaming, and that's when she came out of the bathroom. So the lady never actually witnessed her do anything to the dog or take the baby, and she was still in the apartment. So
there's still an element in the movie to where you could actually think that the Candyman is in her head. That it's really her doing. I mean, you can also look at it this way as kind of a mental illness thing as well. And they kind of play it that way. If you look at it to where it may very well have been just her doing the crimes, that her obsession with it brought it to life, and where she's seeing it happen, we're seeing it from her point of view. But in reality, maybe she's the one hacking apart dogs and killing all these people with supernatural strength.
Well, it's
also in Nightmare on Elm Street too.
It's also one of those things where you allow yourself to dive headfirst into these stories and into the preservation of a particular place's pain and the subsequent folklore and all that stuff. You allow that in, you allow yourself to feel it, and then it sticks with you. It gets into you. I think that's another key kind of metaphorical reinforcement.
yeah, fair enough. I think it's like basically after that, she ends up getting like released from jail. And during this stage of the stuff, her friend's kind of trying to come by and comfort her and whatnot, and she's just basically going batshit. Like they're seeing a counselor, or I think it's a lawyer maybe. She has no idea what happened. She just went from the parking garage to this bathroom. She's trying to explain that. It sounds fishy as shit. I think everyone around her is pretty much assuming she's just lost her mind in her pursuit of this mystery, which kind of does in a lot of ways turn out to kind of be the case. But eventually, the Candyman shows up and pretty much tells her, like, you're going to be mine. Like, your death will make you immortal, kind of a thing. And all stuff that doesn't really, have the impact that it has until, like, the finale of the movie. But essentially, he hits her on the neck, causes her to bleed out. Meanwhile, her friend Bernadette is, at the front door of the apartment. And later on, when she wakes up, we see that she has just been stabbed brutally to death. And man, is it a fairly graphic. What's that? Yeah. I don't know. It was a graphic murder scene, though, man.
No, I was just saying her blood. No, she was pretty much blood. Her blood was drained.
Oh yeah, yeah. She was full of stab wounds, kind of gray complexion going on there. It was gnarly.
She also gets her. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
No, go ahead. You first.
I was just saying, we also get the first hints in those areas that her husband is cheating on her from her knowledge at that point. Yeah. Because when she's in the police station that night, she has to stay the night in jail because she tries her only phone call to call him, and of course he's out screwing the other girl at this point, so he's not there to pick up.
You get a hint right out of the gate when she
you do, but
this was the
this is for her. This is her revelation.
Really. She did accuse him. It was playful. She was like, "Were you flirting with her? She's too young for She noticed it, but it was not like definite. But this was where the hell is he at 3 a.m? This made her think about it.
For sure.
Yeah.
As it should. And plus, we already know from T2 that he's a creep. He tends to play those.
Let's see. The actor is Xander Berkeley, right? That's not the most trustworthy name,
Right? Sounds a bit sketchy. But basically, at this point,
like
she
is
screwed. She's absolutely screwed at this point because she's been found with her friend murdered in her own house. So she ends up getting sedated and placed in a psychiatric hospital. And it jumps forward a month, to her shock and awe. She realizes that she's been in there a month doing all kinds of crazy business. Outside of her own control. They show her these tapes and she's kind of freaking out, like the whole thing's setting in that really she is, in quite the situation here. She, claims that she can prove that it's not her doing it by summoning the Candyman. And so she's in there kind of with the head psychiatrist, dude. And she does as much, and he shows up and just splatters the fella all over his desk.
Puts him in half of his hook.
Yep. Yeah, it's gnarly, dude. And then he flies out the window like Batman backwards, and you can really see the cables.
That's more like Dracula.
I'm sorry, but that is not the wisest thing. But of course, she's not. She's already kind of shown herself not to be the wisest person. And then
I'd be willing to wager the doctor believed her after that.
Well, the doctor did, of course, and he's setting it up because he knows that they're not going to believe him.
Before he went flying out the window, or after he crashed into the ground?
I'd say somewhere in that general area of time. Though, he was framing her too for all that
for
stuff.
Sure. Like he's setting it up so that she just looks crazier and crazier, so that she's trapped in this desperate situation of no one's going to believe me anyways. So I got to try to do something to at least redeem myself a little bit here. And that's kind of where she goes off in search of the little tiny baby. But I take some issue in that scene, as awesome as the splattering is, with him flying backwards out of that window, because you can visibly see both the cables holding them up. Like, how do you see that on a daily and not reshoot it and just do some type of dissolved or just something? Maybe just she turns and he's not there, instead of fucking lame Lost in Space cables carrying the guy around.
Yeah, him just randomly disappearing. Him just disappearing because she turned and looked back. I mean, that would be more Batman right there,
Yeah. I never seen no cables on Batman when he's swinging out some shit.
Exactly.
I would say more Dracula than Batman, personally.
Well, it's that running joke that, like, where'd he go?
Well, Dracula can turn into mist and fog.
He can, and wolves.
And wolves, and bats, and this and that, and the other thing.
Dracula can do too many things.
He is. He's kind of like Superman. And after this, she's able to escape because this dude's dead, and so she's just like, I'm gonna get the fuck out of here. So she goes home.
Confusion,
yeah, she runs on home, and Trevor's already got a new girl moved in, and they're painting the house a new color, which after a month is a bit much. And she has a pretty bone-chilling scene with those dudes where you see that this is actually kind of got her a bit cracked. She's trying to be intimidating to him and like scare him and stuff.
Oh, she didn't have to try hard.
No, not at all.
Poor girl looked like she was...
Is it just me, or was that the ugliest paint job? I mean,
it was pretty bad.
That bright pink. Oh,
yeah.
Gosh. I would not know.
It was nasty.
It reminds me of Michelle Pfeiffer's apartment in Batman Returns. Just
we could easily read that as like because there's a lot of griminess in the ghetto and stuff. You could easily look at that as a way to say that the upper crust kind of trendy fashion trends and that kind of stuff, that they're just as grimy in their own way. Tacky, yes.
Tacky's
Pepto-Bismol pink and nobody's color.
There was a movie called
Pepto-Bismol pink. It seems to be the color for girls these days, anyways. So
that guy was chasing a lot of tail, so I guess maybe there's some correlation.
There was a movie called Rising Storm that was a lot like that, where you got to see the terrible style of the 80s as projected in the future, and how much worse it would have gotten if we kept along those lines.
The 80s would have been day-glow pink. Sure.
Yeah,
that might have not been worse.
This was the early 90s, so it wasn't that much better. It was just the tail end of the worst end of the 80s.
I know, that day-glow is pretty sweet, dude.
That's what I was going to say. It might not have been as bad as the Pepto-Bismol, you know?
You get like a badass day-glow pink and blue friggin' windbreaker. That's the shit right there. Badass fucking beaver tail mullet going on. That's what you need.
Fucking
but pretty much after this, after she has this super uncomfortable confrontation with her cheating husband, she flees back to Cabrini Green to confront Candyman. That's where we get the infamous him puking up all the bees all over, and he's basically telling her that, the only way you can save the baby is to surrender to me and these bees, and that's pretty much the gist of it. At some point, she kind of, I forget how exactly she picks up on that the baby is in the junkyard. But that's where we end up from here. Is basically we have this whole reveal of Candyman, his rib cage full of bees, and he's like spitting them out and shit. And then she ends up, tracking this baby to this junkyard, and she's in there trying to get the baby. Candyman shows up and is like talking some shit. And meanwhile, the people basically have somehow realized that she's like lured him to this,
and they all died.
Well, the little kid,
Guy Fawkes,
the little kid that we haven't actually talked about all that much. He sees she has the hook, and he sees it as she's disappearing into the pile.
Yep.
And it's like, he's in there, yay!
And he just rallies a friggin' pitchfork mob. Right. And they burn the son of a bitch down while they're in there. Candyman's flailing around. She's desperate to save this baby. I'm not sure how much to just save the baby or to prove that she's not crazy and that she didn't do it. But that whole sequence there with the burning junkyard is just nuts, man. Yeah, I get that it's probably not Virginia Madsen doing the stunt work. But, man, I mean, there's a lot of burning shit falling on that person. They lit him legit on fire. Like with one of those sweaters that looks like it burns real quick and fast. And a wig, burning wig on there. She comes out from under the blanket, after she's like low crawled out of there on fire. The people put her out. She comes out of there, hands him the baby. She's looking like Angelica's doll from friggin' Rugrats. Like all her hair's burned off. And, pretty much that's kind of the end of it. They do an open casket funeral with her, which is a bit odd considering
she was closed casket.
I think it was.
We just gotta look inside.
They show a shot inside.
Yeah, they show a shot inside.
And thank God, no one needs to see that burnt bald headed shit right there.
And then of course we get.
That was an interesting scene too. They finish up that nice little sad funeral where he actually brought his girlfriend to the funeral, and then you get the Cabrini Green crowd comes filing in and
drops the hook in the grave.
Drops the hook in the grave. Yeah, it was
like iconic shit right there.
Yeah, well, they did get Candyman in that fire, so hey.
Presumably, I mean they made two more movies
of a trophy.
Well, one of the intents,
at least, they're remaking Candyman in 2021, supposedly.
Right. Well, it's going to be. It was supposed to come out last year, but it got delayed because of COVID.
Yeah.
But I mean, the original
all grown up.
But we haven't finished the plot of this Candyman yet.
Right.
So after
right
the funeral, her husband is kind of regretting the choices he's made. Like I kind of enjoyed like this little
buyer's
thing.
remorse.
Well, I kind of enjoyed this little scene where the new girlfriend is like, "Want me to make some dinner?" And she's just kind of not into it. She, takes a piece of meat out of the fridge, throws it on the counter.
Well, she's pissy because he's not paying attention to her.
Yeah.
And he's remembering like when Helen would make dinner and how she like enjoyed doing it.
Mm-hmm.
There's like a little flashback of her like happily cooking as opposed to, this new girl. And he says Helen's name in the mirror 5 times. And Helen appears as pretty much as the new Candyman.
Yep.
And hooks the shit out of him.
I love
And
that.
she
ending.
repeats that line from that moment that they had like that tense exchange in the apartment where she's like, "Are you afraid of something?" And then she just stabs the shit out of him. But I thought it was cool how they kind of put that effect on her voice, sort of like Candyman, where she now has like the urban legend voice or whatever you want to call it.
Well, I see
Just good
the
stuff.
boom.
And
of course,
sequel...
go ahead. I was going to say it kind of sets the girlfriend up for being the killer in the end there too. So, but go ahead.
Right, and I think the final scene we see is a mural of her now. With her hair on fire, which is hilarious because that part always makes me laugh. And that's the last thing we see is her hair on fire. It's good stuff.
I mean, from what I've heard, a lot of this is very similar to the Halloween series in a lot of ways, is that it wasn't intended to continue on with the same villain, but the villain was so much larger than life that the studio had said, screw you. We're going to screw you and your ideas. We are going with the same villain to keep going.
Again, Hollywood was trying to look for a new Freddy or Jason for the 90s.
Did anyone notice like how easily on hand they had those torches and gas cans and stuff?
Yeah.
They were like, yes, we need to know when the next opportunity is to do the mob, and so we can have the torches, so we're ready just in case we need to,
the kid did say early on that they were going to do a bonfire.
Yeah.
For the party.
The party. Now, one thing I read was that this, of course, was originally a British story.
It was.
And that was originally supposed to be for Guy Fawkes Day. So in this movie, they don't have that background, but you could see that group thinking it would be good to have a nice big party with fire at some point.
That's why I said, and the mob showed up with masks of Guy Fawkes.
Fire.
V for Vendetta is the sequel that.
No one put that forward for next month, did they?
Yeah.
Oh well.
Oh yeah, true.
Well, I think that you could count that as a superhero thing because he wears a mask and he's doing extraordinary things.
I will say, I think Alan Moore would put a snake curse on all of us if we watched it.
Yeah, probably.
With his fucking beard snakes, probably.
Could have been worse. We also could have done League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
I enjoyed that, but
Well, we have From Hell as one of the nominees. So
anyway, getting back to Candyman.
Yes.
So it's time for special effects, which the effects in this movie were pretty great. I feel like I say that a lot, but I really mean it this time. Like the gore was nasty, yet still really grounded. Like it didn't. Nothing looked really extravagant.
They didn't get over the top with it, or like too gratuitous with it either, which was nice.
Yeah, even Candyman's more extreme physical features, like the exposed ribs with the beads coming out of them, that's my background. Pretty convincing.
Incidentally, everything they did with the bees, that was, I don't know, I guess that could be considered an effect because it's practical effects in a sense.
Practical effects
good
with
that. Yeah.
I think that they did good with most practical effects, except for what Mo pointed out. Apparently, that
I've never noticed the wires in that scene.
Me neither.
Oh man, it
happens
pretty quick.
I didn't really notice the wires, but the angle of ascension, I've always found that kind of wonky in most any movie where you have someone who's clearly being yanked by wires very suddenly, and it looked a little weaker than it might have. But yeah, I agree. Mostly, I thought the effects were pretty solid. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I mean, and we got those good splatter moments without it getting ridiculous. I'm a fan of blood and gore in excess, even, but certain movies, like, it just doesn't lend itself to that shit. If they had filled this with a bunch of blood and gore, it would have taken away from the serious tone of all of it, and it would have just been another shit fest splatter movie, which still would have been fun because there's bees involved. But yeah, it's just it's not what we needed. They did a real good job with them.
I think that was one thing that separates it out from a lot of other movies of its time. Is and it's kind of going back to the plot, but I do think that the plot in relation to the gore was a good ratio, which a lot of times, as Mo said, sometimes they just want to overdo the gore and say this is what it is, and those movies can be fun to some, and though not as much to me, but I think having the story itself, the mystery, the intrigue, and some of the twists and turns really made this into something more than just your average kill them all movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think character-wise, this has more to it than a lot of other slasher / supernatural horror films of the period. It seemed like they were really trying to say something about society in a way that they weren't with other things. Like, I think you get some of the kind of suburban urban legends with or suburban legends with Nightmare on Elm Street, and this is much more of a firmly urban legend. But in both cases, it's like you got the sense that they were going for something more. And I mean, I guess you could probably make some arguments for Jason, but it's nowhere near as emphasized, as it is here. Plus, this one's just got the richness of the history as well.
It's like if they took like a bucket of blood and mixed it with like Frankenstein's monster with the mobbish type uniformity against Candyman originally in his urban legend story, and just kind of created its own, mythical background.
I was just hating on that pimped out fur coat, man. I mean, it's got that fringe. That's like so fucking awesome.
It is a sweet fur coat. Like his outfit is so awesome.
Yeah, who wouldn't want that coat?
Okay, well, moving on to the score. So this is a score by Philip Glass with a lot of really memorable riffs in it.
He total lightweight when it comes to the music world.
Oh yeah.
He never did anything of note outside of film or anything. Only being one of the most accomplished modern composers of who's still alive.
3-time Oscar nominee, but not for this one, I'm afraid.
Well, he did some brilliant music for The Hours, for The Truman Show. He did a contemporary score of 1931 Dracula, which is interesting because that film only has music in the opening and ending credits, and it's pre-recorded. It was Swan Lake by Tchaikovsky. So he went back and he said, "I'm going to do a whole brand new score for this movie."
I don't know how I feel about that.
That's a neat.
It'd be an interesting thing to see. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I'd want that as my default position for it because the no score makes it creepy. But
yeah, But I like giving people the option, though.
Yeah, sure. Why not?
Go
ahead, Dustin.
So I have a book, Blood and Black Wax, about horror movie soundtracks. And from what I recall from reading that, Philip Glass wasn't too proud of this soundtrack for some reason.
From what I read, he apparently felt he was tricked a little bit. That like he thought it was going to be more of like a highbrow film, which But I read what I read was that
Well,
he's grown to be at least less critical of it over the years. But
I was gonna say relative to films of its genre and of its time period and all that stuff, I
right,
think it's got quite a bit going on.
yeah,
It's not again, it's not The Hours, it's not
no,
other films that he would later work on, but
The Illusionist.
The Illusionist.
yeah.
It's not trying to be.
Yeah, but like I said, I love the score. I thought it was really good, and I was pleasantly surprised. I was like, because the main theme is really nice and dark and haunting, but there's also that piano theme that plays that's really cool. Yeah, so
Yep, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's only available on like a CD that's like music from Candyman, and it's got like 6 or 7 tracks from Candyman and like 6 or 7 tracks from Candyman 2. It's got a really weird release history.
yeah,
Sometimes that happens, like in
happens a lot with
like
soundtracks.
well, especially like a weird one is Castaway. How that movie has score music only after Tom Hanks, spoiler, only after he physically makes it off the island, not necessarily home yet, but
Spoiler.
physically off the island through the boat. That's the only time when that music shows up. And so, like, if you try to look for the soundtrack, you'll see Castaway and a ton of other Alan Silvestri, Robert Zemeckis collaboration themes on there, and so you have like the end credits theme for Castaway. That's like the very last track, so they had to make it like a greatest hits kind of thing. But yeah, that's the best that they could do, really.
Well, and this is one thing that for me is I don't think it was an issue with this movie, but it's a long bone of contention for me when it comes to the score category, which I will talk about if we do Ghost World next month, because Dave Catay's score for that film was phenomenal. But from what I understand, it's one piece of music recut and re-edited throughout the film, so it's ineligible. Just kind of stupid. Someone sitting at home listening to it would think it's a full score. They wouldn't necessarily know.
I will say this. I'm glad that, because at the time, especially early 90s, we are so lucky that they didn't just go tone deaf with it and the studio just cram hip hop into every second of this movie.
Yeah.
It would have made it a fun soundtrack to buy after the fact, but it would have fucking ruined the movie.
It would have been different, yeah.
I think that
they did that.
There was no other way to do this, I think, soundtrack wise, and make it come out as it did.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, agreed.
So, we ready to move on to favorites? Who wants to go
Sure,
first?
do it.
Well,
I'll go. Oh, shit, you first, Jake.
Okay. Well, aside from the music, there were a few parts I actually genuinely liked in this one, and a lot of the scenes involving either Helena or Candyman, especially as she starts losing her grip on reality and whatever. Some of those were fun, but I'm going to be honest. Probably my favorite scene was the final scene where her douchebag husband gets what's coming to him. I enjoyed that.
I think if I had to pick an absolute favorite is that goddamn wig getting set on fire, bro. Like when she comes out from under there looking like Angelica's doll. Do a side-by-side comparison. I did it when I was sitting here and I was like, yeah, I wasn't imagining it. That's pretty much what happened right now. That would probably be my favorite in terms of overall entertainment value because I laugh my fucking ass off every time. But really, in reality, the whole second half, like once she gets in the shit with that first, attack on that girl and the baby's missing, like everything of the movie after that is kind of my favorite. That would be cheating in a large sense, so I'll just go ahead with him in the rib cage of bees and spitting them up and all that. Like, of course, that's my favorite. But the whole second half of this is banging.
I think I agree with that, from at least in terms of my favorite, because it's hard to pick a favorite when there's so much to like. I think if I really had to nail down one moment, I think I like when the doctor is like, okay, prove it. Say his name. Candyman, 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 Candyman. And then, boom, he's there. Pow. The guy dies.
Yeah, that's good stuff. He comes up and it's like a Guar show. It's just spurting blood and just general directions. It's not even like realistic
it
to
is
the
not
wound.
subtle at all.
Love it.
It's just like
visually, my favorite moment would probably be that exact moment where she's stepping through the Candyman mural through the mouth.
Oh yeah,
because almost you could look at that
Wow.
symbolically as like that's where she goes beyond the point of no return in the movie in a lot of ways too.
That is my favorite moment
Ow.
of the film because you get to see like the story of the
Sorry, he's biting my feet.
the story of Candyman throughout that whole entire mural, even
Ow!
after.
Get off! Ow! Yeah, sorry.
Bees.
Want to try muting your mic?
It's those
Sorry.
bees.
Yeah, it's the bees. Blame it on the bees.
There's always a few they can't wrangle up afterwards. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Anyway, continue, Dave.
But after she continues through the mural, I mean that whole artistry behind the mural and how well it's on those walls and shit like that. I mean that is just something beautiful. I mean, anytime I see something like graffitied mural things, I just think that sometimes they can be told really well.
Oh, for sure. It's great for art form,
It's
know,
like
and it's
caveman paintings in the modern world,
in a lot of ways, dude. And it's this. I will say that in terms of like general, I don't know if it was set design or some of that was just art, graffiti that was there, or if they got access to the place and had people come in and graffiti it. But it all looked very natural. I've been around a fair amount of graffiti, and you can tell in a movie when it's just like they put shit that looked like graffiti, or they had actual people come in and do graffiti. There is like a difference, and some of it looked really convincing. So either they did their homework or they had actual graffiti people tagging it up. But it's pretty cool. And then that mural is just beautiful, man. I mean, there's a reason they stuck it on Dane's release over there. It's iconic.
Oh yeah. Well, I think that the first time we see this image, but also the first time that we see Candyman in his full glory, even before we see the chest opening up, I think those are my favorites, just because you get to see kind of a face to a name.
All right, so fired off. Whoever hasn't gone.
I don't think Forrest has gone.
All right, I think I would have to agree with Mo. When he's opening up his coat, when Candyman opens up his coat to reveal the bees and expose ribs.
It's the only time I've ever been excited to be flashed by someone.
It's
the Chicago Flasher.
Yeah.
What are you doing, Dane?
Well, what Ash is doing is he's knocking over my camera, he's knocking over my screen, everything.
Cat wrangling.
Get that thing under control.
I'm trying to, trust me.
Continue, Forrest.
But yeah, I would say the part where he opens up his coat and exposes the ribs and the bees. That I thought that was a really cool effect. Oh God, and I would also have to agree. Also, the mural artwork was really fantastic. This was really fantastic. It's kind of all I really got. And also Trevor getting what's coming to him. There's just a lot of great moments in the second half.
I agree with Forrest. That's not next to the scene in the candy shop at the beginning in the background here, where Candyman starts singing a song and then giving it to the kids. But next to that, my favorite scene is the one I agree with Jake, because I'm sorry, it sets this up, and I'm sitting there saying, "Nah, you don't get to cry over this loss. It's your freaking fault. Half of this stuff is happening. Nah, screw you." And then you got the little stuck-up brat that's trying to fix his meal, is upset because somebody that he's been with died. It's just, I'm glad to see that ending. It worked out well. So other than the song and dance number, yeah, that was
that part where he attached the body to that ladder and just swung it so it did a lap around there independently. You know, that was a good time.
Is that everybody?
Yeah. Oh, actually, I just wanted to mention that hoity-toity British professor gets what's coming to him in the next movie.
I loved how he laughed at her when she didn't know the history. I don't know why I like those douchey rich guys so much. Those high society dudes where he's like, wah, wah, wah. Like he just laughs at her for being ignorant.
Have a little bit of cheek on her or something like, I'm going to bury you with my report. And he's like, really? Did you even read my paper?
He shut her down. It was great.
Yeah. But now, correct me if I'm wrong, but was that Ted Raimi in that role? I know he
was in the movie.
That was him.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Because I see him occasionally, but I still sometimes wonder when I see him. It's always fun to see, any Raimi involved in a project. But
yeah, Skinner was involved.
Yeah. I tell you what, though, when I first saw him, with the fake British accent, I was thinking it reminded me a little bit of Stephen Fry. And that would have been a fun thing.
I love those high society dudes that put on some accent like that, because
Right.
it's just you're not just learning that, man. That's because other dicks around you talk like that you do.
Now that's an idea, though. If anyone out there is looking to produce a horror movie that's a little different, you need to get Stephen Fry to play a serial killer in a slasher flick.
Do it up.
I bet he could be pretty damn scary if he wanted to be.
Oh, I'm sure he could.
No one expects the Spanish Inquisition.
Find a way to get Hugh Laurie in there. Do a slasher reunion of that group.
Seriously.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that's it for Candyman, everybody. Keep it short and sweet. Normally, we do outros for our channels. I'm just going to leave us real quick with subscribe to the Crypto Horrors on YouTube.
Do it, yeah.
And
Good
we'll
stuff
see you next time.
Well, hold on.
Definitely.
We do have our closing ritual here. I'm going to read these out to you guys real quick out of the guide to the regional horror films from 1958 to 1990 with interviews, a state-by-state guide by Brian Albright. We got 5. This is the Illinois list. It's short but sweet. We got 555 from 1988, directed by Wally Kaz. We got Black Devil Doll from 1984, directed by Chester Novel Turner. We got a couple of different Herschel Gordon flicks on here. We got The Gore Girls from 1972 and The Wizard of Gore from 1970, both of which I will have reviews coming up for here soon. Yeah. We got Monster A Go-Go from 1965, directed by Bill Redbane. Rebane, excuse me. We got The Psychic from 1968
he is
by
quite the
James F.
character.
Hurley. We got The Psychotronic Man from 1978 by Jack M. Sell. And, 3 Herschel Gordon flicks on here. We also got Something Weird from 1967 and Tales from the Quaded Zone from 1987. Also directed by Chester Novel Turner, which if you have on VHS tape is worth a small fucking fortune. So there you go, guys. Get out there and check those out. All types of goodness from the great state of Illinois. And that's all I got to add there, Dustin.
I can't wait to hear your Virginia list on the Hannibal one when it posts.
I think it was decent. Dane's was long as shit.
I'm kind of surprised because North Carolina is not really typically known for being a place where a lot of big movies are filmed or whatever. But we have our
wait till we get
share,
to New York.
Oh man! The question is, what do you leave off with New York?
Yeah, I know. Now, I will have to do a shout out because I just finished reading Ready Player 2, which is a good book. And there are several chapters dedicated to the filmography of John Hughes, which of course is very much Illinois there. And some people would call that horror.
Well, With that, I think we're going to let you go. So I hope you enjoyed our discussion. Like, share, and subscribe to Inside Movies Galore. And yeah, we'll see you on the next discussion.
Definitely.
Yep, coming up shortly.
Just after dawn.
Woohoo!
Ladies and gentlemen, join us on our
that
channel
long.
there.